I would pitch like crazy. I got rejected a million times. But I was the guy who, when they would say, that's not good, we're going to pass on it, I was the guy who would stay and go, okay, I get it. What do you think I could do better?
Listening to Inside Acting, a podcast dedicated to demystifying the inner and outer game of success in the entertainment industry. I'm AJ Meyer.
And I'm Trevor Algott, and coming up today in episode 303, we have part 2 of Jasmin and AJ's conversation with writer, director, and animator Jorge R. Gutierrez. Part 2 today is all about how Jorge got his film, The Book of Life, made. From making the tough choice to leave a huge multi-million-dollar deal at DreamWorks, to his very tangential contribution to the musical Hamilton, to the most harrowing pitch story you've ever heard. These are the challenges and lessons to getting almost anything made in Hollywood, especially if you want that thing to stay true to your original vision. It's in episode 303, coming up right now. Stay with us.
Support for this episode of Inside Acting is brought to you in part by Rehearsal Pro, the current version of Rehearsal, the essential app for actors. It's available now on the iTunes App Store, so if you want to learn your lines, be off book for your audition, explore your character, make stronger choices, and do a whole lot more, go to rehearsal.pro/IAP right now to learn about all the cool new features in this newest version of Rehearsal, the groundbreaking app designed by actors for actors. That's rehearsal.pro/IAP.
Good morning, brother. How you doing?
Good morning. Hello, sir. My life is great. I feel like our country is once again hemorrhaging, and I couldn't figure out a way to, I mean, not that we should or shouldn't, but I didn't want to not address, what's going on right now, because it just feels, I don't know, it feels too big, It feels like one of those things that, like, if we didn't talk about it, it would be stranger than if we did. If that makes sense.
You're speaking specifically about the school shootings in Florida?
Yeah.
As of this recording, that just happened maybe a week ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was after the recording of our last episode. Every time, it's not just the event itself, but every time this happens, and it's crazy to me that I have to say those words, every time this happens. It shouldn't be a thing that we have to say, but I feel like every time this happens, there's this crazy upheaval of emotion and vitriol, and I would call it dialogue, but it's not really dialogue. It's just people, like, screaming at each other via social media and media. I was in a lot of pain this week as a result of it, and like I said, it didn't feel right to just kind of breeze on by. I wanted to sort of like stop and acknowledge that it happened, and maybe B, we can talk about, like, I don't know, how it affects, artists who are sort of also advocates and or activists, I should say, and then sensitive to, the sort of energetic and emotional vibrations of other humans. I don't know, does that make sense?
This has happened so many times over the course of us recording this podcast, and I feel like every time it happens, we come around to the idea that we have this responsibility as artists to do something about it, but do something in that transmutational way, as it were, of artistry. And I don't know, man. We always talk about this, how we have more work to do, and it just does get exhausting after a while. And I don't necessarily know what the solution is, but I'm curious and intrigued by what you just said there about the sort of vibrational level. Can you talk more about that?
Well, I mean, I feel like, there's this new recently formed idea about, HSPs, like highly sensitive or hypersensitive persons. There's like a TED talk on it. There was a book that was written about it. And I don't think I'm not equating being an artist with being an HSP. I'm just saying that, like, I have plenty of people in my life. I feel like I'm surrounded by people who are somewhere on the spectrum of an HSP, and I'm also surrounded by artists, obviously. And I feel like artists especially are sensitive to, what's kind of going on in the world, regardless of whether or not it's happening directly to them. And so that's kind of my point is not only, was it painful, as I said, but like you said, Trevor, I feel sort of helpless to do anything about it. Like it feels so empty to just like retweet something or post something on social media. I know not to make light of the situation, but it always reminds me of that sketch that they did on SNL where they were like singing, "Thank you, Scott. You read something on the internet and then posted it on the internet." Like that's the whole the whole joke of the song is you saved the world by, posting something on social media. Thank you. Yeah. This sort of sarcastic thing. I just feel kind of powerless sometimes. There just seems to be this unstoppable force of money and greed and politics and misinformation and people who are just very, very committed to being right about a lot of things, including guns and, their rights to them. So anyway, I know it's not a political podcast, but it's also a podcast about being human. And I don't know, for me, it's been a challenging week to kind of grapple with the messiness that is being human.
Yeah, the armchair activism that you just sort of spoke into there about people, just posting on social media about it and getting outraged and then going back to their lives and, feeling justified in being angry and upset, but not really changing any behaviors or taking any sort of additional physical action is something that I think we can all agree is a sort of a tired thing in our world. I mean, there is something to be said for awareness. Absolutely. Spreading awareness, standing up and using your voice to speak for a cause is huge. But that's like the easiest path of least resistance.
It's the easiest version of that.
Yeah. I'm curious, AJ, if time and money and all other circumstances in your life were not an object, what are two things that you would go do right now to alleviate situations like this in the world? I'm putting you on the spot big time. I apologize in advance. Jesus. But I guess I'm just thinking, I mean, it's one thing to be upset about it, and I'm 100% there with you. It breaks my heart, and I have to actively sort of keep myself moving and keep my mind off of these things. But if feeding myself, housing myself, clothing myself, showing up for a job, all those things weren't an issue, there are a lot of things I know I would be interested in going to do. Maybe what are one or two things that you would go do right now if none of that were an issue?
Well, I might make a film. That's I say that because I think that part of our job as artists to respond with our art. So, you and I worked on plays that focused on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan for years. And that was sort of our artistic response to what was going on in the world. So, I might make a film. Like that seems like something that would be a combination of passion and artistry and activism. But also I feel like I would get involved on, at the grassroots level, like find where the, advocacy groups for, common sense gun laws and stuff operate, and maybe, meet up with them in DC and sort of dive in full time there. I mean, you're saying that, money and time and all that are no object. I would be, there are certain things that I'm passionate enough that I would make them a full-time thing, at least for a while, whether it be a month or a year or something, I don't know. But
and based on the information that you have right now, what end goal would you be pursuing? What needs to happen for this kind of thing to not continue to occur?
Well, there's so much. It's not.
I'm asking you huge questions. I know. I apologize.
In the few minutes we have to. There's no one thing. First of all, it's not just about guns. It's not just about gun laws. There's a lot. There's a lot of healing that this country needs to do around race and sexism, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of yes, mental health, but more than that, acknowledging that we have a problem with specifically men. Like 98% of these mass shootings are carried out by men. I can't remember a time when a woman was involved. Maybe the shooting in San Diego where there was a woman involved. There are so many different strings to this spider web that the gun laws alone are it's just one part of it. But we have plenty of examples, like, Jasmin's Australian. And I know so many people have probably seen this, viral video or meme or whatever about, what happened there. But they had one mass shooting, and they basically outlawed guns and haven't had one since. I mean, it's just like.
Yeah, but do you think that would actually fly in the United States?
No, and no, it wouldn't, and that's the problem, and that's what I mean about, like, the work that we have to do. No, it wouldn't, and that's really disheartening. It's not it's not, to me, that's not a light thing to acknowledge. That no, it probably won't, and that's crazy to me. It's the only country in the world where this happens. The only one. We have tens of thousands of, and never mind like mass. Okay, now I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit, but you started it. Never mind mass shootings, gun deaths, period. Gun deaths. Like people who shoot themselves, commit suicide with a pistol. Like, we have more gun deaths than any other country on the planet. So it's not just these mass shootings. It's an issue that we have with guns, period, like across the entire society, because there's so much money involved and so much of this weird obsession with them. The answer is no. No, it's not. It's not. It's probably not going to happen, at least in my lifetime. I don't know that I see it happening. I mean, my hope is that this generation of these high school students who are already gathering and advocating and talking about a walkout on April 20th, the anniversary of Columbine, I can actually see that causing a major shift. But we've been dealing with it for so long that, it makes me feel like, no, it's not going to happen here. And that's crazy to me. It's just, I don't understand how we keep letting this happen.
Yeah, there are deep cultural and psychological and identity issues at play here. This is the country where this happens the most frequently, and they are the deadliest shootings in the world. But this is also the country with the most bounty and the most control in the world, and the most freedom, well, arguably the most freedom of speech. I don't know, spindles, whatever, strands of the spider web that are, sort of working together, and you can't pluck one without plucking them all. I don't know what it looks like moving forward, but I put you on the spot with those questions because I hope our listeners are also sufficiently sort of fed up to the point where it's just not enough anymore to post about it on social media, to have conversations around the dinner table with people about it, that it is sufficient enough for people who want to take on this issue, take on this fight, and do something more with it. It's so common these days for an issue like this to get people riled up for a week or two, and then we just sort of settle back into the new normal, the wash of white noise with the news, the next big scandal or whatever it is. And it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that this is something that happens all the time. And so if this is something that, you're listening to and you're thinking, God, I'm fed up. I am really fed up. I'm actually going to write down a goal, an end result that I want to affect in the world around this. And here are 2 or 3 solutions that I'm going to start working on right now to make this happen. And I'm going to see them through all the way to the end, no matter what new news piece or think piece comes out on the news next week or next month to take us all in a new direction of fear and anger and whatnot. So I sort of apologize for putting you on the spot, but I also don't, because I want it to ignite a conversation, at least internally among everybody listening, to really just take note of what you're feeling right now and what you're experiencing around this. And if it's something that is not activating you, that's okay. But I think we can all agree that it's not okay when there is a senseless loss of life. And with that as our baseline, we can move forward and really pick and choose what we want to stand for. And as artists, I think this is built in. This is a built-in sensibility that injustice, harm, death, abuse, negligence, violence, this stuff is not okay. And that's sort of what we're working towards. So again, if you are listening to this and you feel sufficiently moved, I urge you to put pen to paper and start to put some plans in place. What can you do beyond tweeting, beyond Facebook posting, beyond Instagram rants? What can you do to make a big difference? What can you physically go out into the world and do? Who can you call? Where can you show up? What meetings can you attend? What lobbying activities can you be involved with to affect a tangible end result in the world?
Thank you for articulating my point better than I ever could.
Anything else before we jump into this interview?
No, man. I am all talked out.
All right. So here we go. Part 2 of Jasmin and AJ's chat with writer, director, and animator Jorge Gutierrez. If this is anything like part 1, we are all in for a treat. Enjoy, guys. We'll see you on the other side.
First of all, what's the name of your animation studio that you...
Mixopolis. So Mixopolis is our little independent animation studio, and it's basically Sandra and myself. Mm-hmm. And so wherever we are, that's the company.
Got it. And so when you started work with these bigger jobs for like Nickelodeon with El Tigre and stuff, was that did they hire you, or did they hire your animation studio?
They would hire me, and then I would say, I have a little studio. We can hire the studio to do your pilot. And so it was always sort of me and the studio were connected.
Got it.
And the studios don't care, right? They're like, we don't want to know. Just Where do we send the check?
Yeah.
Right.
And for me, it was making the little student short open the door, selling that little internet cartoon at Sony made all the other studios go, oh, if Sony trusted you to do this, now that we're TV channels, you're less of a risk. Because at the end of the day, everybody's looking to minimize the risk, right? They want to find out if you're a crazy person or how risky it is to work for you, right? Those are the two things.
Yeah.
And so thanks to having a show at Sony, all the TV places, Disney, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, basically called us up and said, hey, would you guys be interested in pitching a TV show? And that's what we did. I would pitch like crazy. I got rejected a million times. But I was the guy who, when they would say, that's not good, we're going to pass on it, I was the guy who would stay and go, okay, I get it. What do you think I could do better to become better at pitching? What do you think I could do? Not on this thing I just pitched you, but just as a person who pitches. What could I do better? I know you hear pitches all day, and you must be tired of them. What can I do to make it better? And sure enough, we became friends with a lot of the people in development because they're, they want to hear good stuff and they want to make good stuff because the way it works usually is you pitch something, they have to pitch it to someone above them.
Yeah. And
that person has to pitch it to someone above them. And eventually it keeps going up. And so internally, whoever hears the first one is going to get the credit for it. So you want to help them and you want to help yourself. So it became very interesting to sort of learn the inside of how development works. And eventually we got Disney optioned one of the ideas. And as it goes, the best way to get a job is to have a job. So as soon as Disney had a pilot with us, everybody else said, well, now we really need a pilot. And so at some point we had a pilot at Disney, one at Cartoon Network, and one at Nickelodeon.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then they would, you work your ass off on these things. They don't pay very well because the carrot they hold above you is that it could turn into a series.
Yeah.
And so we had to work full-time jobs, and then you do your pilots at night and on the weekends. So it's kind of, but that's how they test you to see how much you're into it. So eventually, Nickelodeon was the place that sort of gave us the biggest opening as far as creativity back then. And that's how we got LT Greg Green into series.
Wow.
One awesome story after another.
Jorge, one of my favorite stories that I heard you tell at the artist dinner was a story about pitching, and it was the journey that was getting the Book of Life to the big screen. That was the highlight for me. Was just hearing the lengths to which you went to make that happen. So I would love to. AJ hasn't heard the story, so I would. Love,
Well, I've heard it retold.
He's heard it retold. I'm nowhere near as good at it as you. So.
Yeah, a couple of these stories, I guess you told at the event, and as soon as Jasmin told me, even the Cliff's Notes version, I was like, oh, we got to have this guy on the show.
Okay, well, here it is. And by the way, when I tell it, I get to relive it.
Yes.
And I get shaken and I'm sweating like
that was what I saw, and I knew you're a storyteller first and foremost. You lived the story of the whole thing, and I felt every bit of it with you. So
okay, so here we go. So Book of Life, Tigre's doing pretty well. A very well-received show. So Book of Life first was at DreamWorks Animation. And I can now tell the story because everybody who was there has now left. And so I was in development on Book of Life there for a year. So I would work on El Tigre during the day and at DreamWorks in the evenings and at night. And at some point, a movie came out over there that didn't do well, so they changed development. Because that's the other thing that happens, the horrible things that happens, is every time something doesn't do well, they change development as if that was the reason the thing didn't do well. And projects become orphans. because the previous regime brought it in. So Book of Life at that point, I get brought into a room and they say, okay, Jorge, in order for Book of Life to move forward, we have some changes. This is in 2008, right? And they say, number 1, can't take place in Mexico. Number 2, no bullfighting.
What?
And number 3, the main character can't die.
Yeah.
Oh.
So in my head, I'm like, wait a second. My movie's about a bullfighter in Mexico who dies.
Yeah. That's it.
So
don't make the movie, basically, is what you're saying.
Well, and then they would say things like, in order for your $160 million movie to move forward, this is what needs to change. Now, again, this is 2008 or 2007. They go, so in order for your movie to move forward, we want it to take place in New York, present day, urban, and we want it to be a hip-hop salsa reggaeton musical.
What?
Yeah.
So
Heights,
I remember thinking like, wait a second, what? Okay, here's where the story gets even crazier. And they go, we just signed the guy that you're going to love. His name is Lin-Manuel Miranda.
What?
I just said it sounds like In the Heights.
Yeah, In the Heights, yeah.
This was In the Heights.
In the Heights.
This is
In the Heights, but anime.
Into
This was
the Mexican Heights.
Yeah, well, this was pre-Broadway In the Heights.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
So they had found them. He had signed. And so I would like to believe that thanks to me quitting, Lynn concentrated and got to do Hamilton. So I feel like I saved Hamilton.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll remind him.
Yeah. When we'll have him on the show someday, and I'll be like,
You're
hey.
welcome, Lynn.
Yeah. Remember
And
that.
I got to have breakfast with him, and I couldn't tell him that story. I was too starstruck.
Oh.
But anyway, so I basically quit. I took the movie with me, and so in the little studio at that point, my wife is pregnant. They canceled El Tigre at Nickelodeon. I just quit my job as a director, and I remember feeling like, okay, this is gonna make me, if whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I'm gonna be bulletproof after this. A little studio out of nowhere approaches me in Texas, and they go, well, we don't have $160 million, but we have 25. And we will spend those 25 if you can figure out how to get us another 25 and find an investor. But you have to move to Dallas, Texas, which I've never been to at that point in my life. And we will let you do the movie exactly how you want to make it. So I talked to all my friends. Everybody says, this is a terrible idea. Don't do it. I talked to my manager. This is a terrible idea. Don't do it. So that's exactly what we did.
What made you decide to do it, given everyone else saying don't do it?
I think at that point, I had worked in big studios, so the allure of that was gone. The prestige of having worked at any place didn't mean anything anymore. To me, it was more about, what do I get to make? And the version of the movie that would happen at DreamWorks would be a horrible movie. And even back then, I knew if I make something horrible and people love it, I'm screwed, because that's what people are going to want me to do for the rest of my life. So I'd rather take my chances, go to this tiny little studio. Worst thing that can happen is we don't make the movie and we come back. And if that's the worst thing that can happen, that's not that bad.
Then you're back where you started.
Where we started, and I will live knowing I gave it a shot.
Yeah.
No regrets. So my wife, being very understanding, said, I hate Texas. I want nothing to do with that, but I love you, and I will do it for you. So we moved. Our kid was 2 years old. We worked there for a year. They let me write the script. I worked with my head writer, Doug Langdale from El Tigre. They let me hire Sandra to help me with designs. They let me hire an art director and a production designer, Simon Varela and Paul Sullivan. First-time art director, first-time production designer. We were all first-timers, right? I'm a first-time director. I thought everybody from El Tigre would come with us. No one came. So we had to start from zero. But that's when the good stuff happens, right? When you have to start from zero.
Sure.
We work on the stuff for a year, and they say, okay, now that you have a script, now that you have a bunch of art, and you have a bunch of sort of visual representations of what the movie is going to be like, now we need a big name producer to help us get the other $25 million. Who would be your dream producer? Well, like all fat Mexican directors, we have one god, and he is Guillermo del Toro.
Yes.
Right. So I said, Guillermo del Toro, he has to be the producer of this. And everybody warned me and said, he gets so many movies pitched to him, it's going to be really tough. He had just come back from New Zealand from The Hobbit not working out. And he was the sexiest, director in Hollywood at that point. He was getting offered Star Wars and any movie you can imagine he got offered.
Wow.
So getting a meeting with him proved to be almost impossible. He rejected me 15 times. I mean, we're buddies now, so he admits that he was perhaps a little harsh on me. And there were meetings where I would show up and I would see him get in his car and drive off. Like, that's how hard it is.
Wait, meetings where he was supposed to meet with you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like all the producers were there, the pitch was ready, and I would get there and then I would see him like literally talk to someone, get in his car and drive all the way.
And you were on time.
And I was on time.
Okay.
Or he would or I would show up and he'd never show up. Or I would show up and then they'd say, oh, you know what happened? They would make up crazy excuses. So after 15 of those, the producer said, we have to move on. This is not working. We're wasting time. And I said, please, 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 one last one. All I want is for him to say no to my face so that I can have that story that I got to pitch to him. So finally, and this is coming from him, he says, he finally was like, okay, fine, bring him to my house so I can say no to him to his face.
Jeez.
And he will stop bothering me. Right? So we go to his house, and this is back when he lived in LA. So he had two houses. One house where he lived with his wife and two daughters. And then the other house, which is his crazy movie collection house that has incredible paintings and art from, not only his movies, but the history of cinema. And he's a huge animation fan. So he has original Sleeping Beauty art, just incredible. It's a museum in there.
Wow.
So we go over there and he opens the door and he's not very nice to me. I've never been, I've only known the Santa Claus version of him, the one from the interviews and the DVD commentaries. So I was kind of shocked. And, he gets so many movies pitched that I was just another dumb guy trying to impress him. And so we go inside his house and they told me he's going to give you 20 minutes to pitch the movie. And so as we're looking around, this is August in LA, it's really hot. We made the horrible decision to pitch outside of his house in the pool area because there was so much artwork inside and there was no room. So we go outside, we set up all the art, we set up all the sculptures. He comes out and he's a big guy. I'm a big, immediately we were both sweating.
Oh, gosh.
And he's really uncomfortable. And I could tell he was really, really not into it. So I take the most important breath of my life at that moment. I conjure my ancestors. Ancestors, give me the strength. This is it. And before I open my mouth, at this point, he calls me gordo, which means fat guy. It's a term of endearment in Mexico. And he goes, gordo, 5 minutes.
Oh, God.
I've been practicing this 20-minute pitch, literally for months. And he just cut it down to 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
So at that point, I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can totally do this. Again, I take the most important breath of my life. Ancestors, give me the strength. And I kid you not, my people betrayed me. And the mansion next door had 5 gardeners with leaf blowers.
No.
And it was almost like they were waiting for me. They were like, look, he's about to say it, go. And like a wave of leaf blower sound hits us, like, So I yell at Guillermo, can we wait until they finish? And he like stared at me with his beautiful blue eyes. And he goes, gordo, 4 minutes.
Oh, God.
So I pitch him
I'm sweating.
Yeah, the worst version of Book of Life you've ever heard. Yelled over 5 leaf blowers. And, it's a really tender movie, so imagine me yelling, and then Ronaldo gets down on one knee and apologizes to the ball. So Guillermo's laughing at me. He's not even laughing at the story. I remember one of the producers was so embarrassed, he just left.
God.
I'll see you guys back in the studio. Disaster. Worst pitch of all time. We're done. Everybody looks super depressed, including me. Guillermo's giving me this look like, oh my God, that was awful. We go into his house. So it's just me and him. And we sit down and he goes, Gordo, that was pretty bad. And I'm like, Guillermo, I'm so sorry. I just want to shake his hand and get out of there and say I got to meet him. And so I tell him, this is my hero. I'm looking for a little olive of hope. So I go, Guillermo, I'm sorry, that was a pretty shitty pitch. And he goes, shitty? That was by far the shittiest pitch I've ever seen in my whole life. Never have I seen anything like that. So I stand up. Thank you, Guillermo. It was an honor to meet you. And he goes, sit down, Gordo. And he goes, look, I have 2 daughters. Every Saturday morning, we would watch El Tigre.
Oh, stop it. I just got goosebumps.
I know who you are now. I just put it together. I know your art. I know how you see Mexico. Of course I'm going to produce your movie.
Oh.
So I stand up, and I'm drenched, and I peed my pants, and I was so sweaty no one could tell. He stands up. I hug him. Our liquids. Talent was all over me at that point. And he pushed me away and he goes, Gordo, did you write the script? Because if you didn't write the script, you're not a real director. And I was like, no, I wrote the script. So I ran out of the car. I ran to my car, and we had gone to a wedding. I opened my car trunk, and there's my script. And at this wedding we went to, they gave you tequila bottles as presents. Tequila bottle broke. My script was drenched in tequila. And so it looked like dried up toilet paper. So I grabbed the script and I'm like just blowing on it, trying to get it dry. And I hand it to him, and he grabbed it with his big, giant hands, and he smelled it. And he goes, "This is a good script." And that was it. He became the producer of the movie. And thanks to you, we got co-financing by 20th Century Fox and distribution. And he became not only perhaps my harshest teacher, but a really good mentor. And now we're really good friends. So he changed my life. And it was all thanks to El Tigre.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, man. I need a nap. Oh, my goodness. So, geez, I don't even know where to go from there. I mean, I've been so excited to talk to you about this film because, Jasmine and I fell in love with it.
I started watching it when he was out, and I got 5 minutes into it, and I was like, I can't watch any more of this without him because he will love it, and he'll hate me if I watch it without him.
Yeah, so then like I said, she found it, sort of introduced it to me. We watched it together. We fell in love with it. And when she was going to this event where she met you and told me I was like, that's amazing. Like, what a crazy, we had just watched the film, not a couple months before then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she wouldn't have been invited if it wasn't for her, connections in the art world from doing live modeling. Anyway, it's just crazy. the intersections that have to happen in life, much like your story. So, now that we are on the subject of Book of Life, there's so many things I want to ask you about, especially since, you just mentioned we just had Coco premiere. And I'm wondering, Well, let me start with some of the harder stuff. I happen to be friends with, through connections in the LA theater scene, I happen to be friends with Richard Montoya and some of the Culture Clash guys. And Richard recently posted on his Facebook page this really long, sort of not explanation, but he was responding to some people who were talking about him and Culture Clash, quote unquote, selling out for their participation in Coco. And I'm wondering if you experienced similar things from your community when Book of Life was released. I mean, I know that most of the crew, as it were, the creative team behind it were Mexican, but then you have, you know, Channing Tatum, for instance, as one of the main, you know, actors in it. Granted, that actor is supposed to come across as a bit of a, you know, gringo, but you know, what were some of the I guess criticisms of Book of Life when it first came out?
Well, it was one of those really complicated things where the movie couldn't be for just one audience, right? It had to be for everyone. It had to be a worldwide film. The movie in Mexico will be dubbed in Spanish. So it's not like Channing Tatum's going to do the voice in Spanish.
Right.
So I knew in Latin America the movie would be done in Spanish. So in the U.S., the fear was if you make a movie with an all-Hispanic cast, you're basically telling the audience, this is just for Hispanic people.
Mm.
This is, again, 2012, a different America than the one we live in now. And by the way, I could have predicted what was going to happen based on all the hate mail we would get.
Oh, gosh.
And so the idea was, how do we convince people who don't like Mexico and who don't like Mexican things to come to this movie that deals with very tough subject matter, right? Death, bullfighting. I mean, we could not have made it harder on ourselves. And what I learned from the casting process was the actors in the movie not only have to be incredible actors, but they become your partners in trying to sell the movie. And so by casting different types of actors, they will hopefully help you get a different kind of audience.
Sure.
And so Mexican people, we had it covered. It was, what about everybody else? How do we get the African-American community to come see the movie? How do we get the Hispanic East Coast community to see the movie? How do we get Middle America to see the movie? And so all that was a huge, huge part of making the film. The studio is basically saying, okay, we're investing $50 million in this movie. We want at least $2 for every dollar we invest. And so as a director, all that gets thrown at you. And you have to make these choices where you go, what's good for the movie, but what will help the movie sell, and what will help the biggest audience come to the movie. Because if you make an incredible movie and no one sees it, it's like you didn't make it.
Yeah.
Right.
So for me, it was, okay, if my main character is Diego Luna, who's a Mexican voice actor, but at that point, this is pre-Rogue One Diego Luna. He had mostly art films. I had to compensate that with someone who was a huge star. And thankfully, Channing Tatum hit it out of the park for us.
Yeah.
But that's how those casts happen. You basically go, for every indie guy, you need a big, giant superstar to compensate.
Yeah.
And, you know, the actresses will hopefully sell the movie in late-night talk shows. The actors will hopefully sell the movie in morning talk shows. Kids don't care. This is all for their parents. And so as a director, when you're told, yes, they should be really good actors, but here's all the other things that you have to do, it gets really complicated. Same thing with the music, right? The music in our movie, when I first pitched it, all those songs that are in the movie were in the script. And I had no idea that you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
It's a huge no-no.
Yeah.
And then I was told, especially the songs I picked, these were all songs that meant stuff to me. So Creep was a big song when I was a teenager. I have an Elvis song in there. I Can't Help Falling in Love. That was my grandma's favorite song. So I had songs, there's a Rod Stewart song that my dad liked. I basically put all the songs that my family loved in the movie, and they're English songs because the movie's in English. And I said, if I put Spanish songs, no one's going to recognize them in the U.S. side. And when we translate them, they're going to sound horrible. It's like listening to Creep in Spanish. It will not be the same experience. So the first song, the big one, was Creep. And I remember Guillermo del Toro saying, I got that song rejected for Hellboy. You are not going to get that song. No one's gotten that song.
Whoa.
What?
And Radiohead feels really weird about that song, so it's going to be almost impossible. So I wrote Radiohead a letter. We cut animatic reels to the song. I explained how much it meant to me. I explained something I saw in Mexico, which was I saw a little mariachi kid sing Creep in Mexico City.
What?
He was from a mariachi family, and he was singing it on his own. And I said, look at this song from England. Look at how this kid has connected to it and made it his own. And that's what we want to do with the song in the movie. And Radiohead not only said, absolutely, you can use the song, but we're going to give it to you for, at that time, a very low fee.
Wow.
No one could believe it. So after that, any band we approached, we could say Radiohead.
Radiohead's on board.
So everybody was into it. And then when they would, charge us crazy amounts of money, we would say, whoa. Radiohead charges this money. Are you saying you're better than Radiohead?
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So we guilted everybody. And so the movie comes out, and in Mexico, they did not translate the songs. So if you were a Mexican movie audience, you would see the movie in Spanish, and then all of a sudden the main character starts singing Creep in English. So for middle-class Mexicans, they got it. But a lot of them were angry. They were like, this doesn't make sense. Why are you doing this? So we got a lot of crap for that on the Mexican side. On the U.S. side, we got a lot of crap for those aren't Mexican songs. Right?
Yeah.
You are not representing the culture. Now, I grew up in Mexico. I'm from the border. I can tell you that people in Mexico don't only eat Mexican food every day. They don't only listen to Mexican music every day. That's like saying Americans only eat hamburgers every day and only listen to Western music every day.
I mean, I guess it depends where you live, but sure.
Sure, right?
I only eat hamburgers.
Yeah.
I said, Mexicans, we are worldly. We live right next to the U.S. We, of course, are citizens of the world. This movie, I'm not the government. I'm not the Arts Council. This is my version of Mexico. As a kid who grew up in the border, this is what I saw. And so because I grew up on the border, I feel like I'm very comfortable disappointing both sides, and I'm okay with it. But on Mexico, we were deemed not Mexican enough. On the U.S. side, especially the hate mail we would get, we were deemed too Mexican. So you're never going to make both sides happy. It's just impossible.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the second of our three-part chat with Jorge Gutierrez. I again, have not had the opportunity to listen to this yet, but I've gone over the notes that you put together, AJ, and again, it's one for the books. Love it. This is useful information, actionable information for anybody, really in any artistic discipline, I feel like. Any big takeaways that you want to highlight for our listeners?
I think the biggest one from this one, well, there's two for me. The one being when he was pitching a ton and we started to get rejected, he started to ask people, how can I be better? How can I do better? And ordinarily, that's not something we're going to ask at an audition or something like, okay, thank you so much. Okay, how can I be better? Obviously, that's not something that an actor can necessarily ask in the room, but I love the mindset of wanting to get better and asking the other people around you, for feedback, etc. It just goes right along with his sort of hardworking mindset. So that was one. And then the other one was what he was talking about in terms of staying true to himself and true to his vision and true to the type of art that he wanted to make. Because there's one quote that I highlighted in the notes where he said, if I make something I hate and people love it, other people love it, I'm screwed, because that's what people will want me to do for the rest of my life. And I was just like, that is such an amazing argument for sticking to your guns and making the art that you love. It's funny that, of course, and we talked about this a little bit at the end of this part, of course he's going to get accused of being a sellout when he gets the opportunity to make these big expensive feature films. But everything about him and his story is the opposite of being a sellout. Right down to that quote that I just mentioned. So those are my two big ones, especially from this part.
Awesome. Yeah, for me, just reading the notes, asking is so huge. And I love the way he asked, okay, how can I be a better pitcher, essentially? Because people do generally want to help. And I think it would catch a lot of people off guard in life generally if each of us listening to this, and hosting this right now, were to actually approach the people in our lives and say, like, look, in some areas of life, I can understand that I'm not a level 10 person. What can I do to be a level 10 person? And whether that's personal relationships or professional relationships, I think that would really be a high leverage activity, so to speak. I love it. Just ask, man. Just ask. So often the answer is yes. And if it's not, so often that just means either you didn't ask the right way, or it's not the right time, or there's something better in store. There's a great saying, I think I've shared this in the podcast before, but when it comes to asking, some will, some won't, so what? Someone's waiting. And what a great philosophy to move through your creative career with.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about picks of the week here. I was just watching the trailer before we started recording for your pick of the week, Lovesick.
I think this was one of those nights where Jasmin and I just wanted to veg out. We were just sitting on the couch. We just wanted to put something on. And it was one of the I think it's a Netflix original. So it's one of the featured ones on the front page, the splash page. So we just clicked on it and then read the little byline. We thought it was hilarious, so we started watching.
What's it about?
Well, I'm not giving anything away because this happens in the first 5 minutes, but basically the main character finds out that he has an STD, and he decides against the advice of his best friend. He decides that he's going to personally reach out to all of his prior sexual partners in order to basically let them know and potentially apologize if they ended up with it as well. Jeez. And so I know it sounds like a really terrible premise for something, but it's really, really well done and genuine and sincere and funny. And, it's just basically the hijinks of him going back and trying to find all these people. And so the show is also told out of chronological order. So it jumps back and forth. And there is a through line. So you kind of are also trying to keep track of when things happened based on, what it says in the lower third, 3 years prior, 4 years prior, 19 months before, that kind of thing. So it's really good. I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a new comedy to check out.
Awesome. And that was 2014, I think it says on the IMDb page there. So I actually recognize a handful of the actors from other British films and TV shows and things.
It's a great cast. Great cast.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
And I know we had some bad news this week, and that's probably what inspired your pick of the week. It did. And strangely enough, I have had this book on my nightstand because I wanted to reread it for the past, 2 or 3 weeks. So I kind of knew this was coming. But Daniel Quinn, who is probably the one writer and thinker that has most influenced my worldview,
Actually, I wouldn't say probably. I would say definitely. He passed away this weekend. It actually hit me kind of hard. I knew he was old and not doing well, but his book, Ishmael, really transformed my life. I remember reading it. I think a lot of us have a book like this, and for me, it was Ishmael. I remember reading it and just my whole world view falling apart before my eyes and a brand new one coming to sort of build in its place. And I have since read all his books and all his essays and watched all his YouTube interview videos many, many, many times because I am just fascinated by how this man's brain works. And there's a handful of people that sort of came online, so to speak, around the same time that he started sort of sharing these ideas. Derek Jensen is another great one, although I find him to be a tad depressing. Tom Hartman and Tom Shadyac are two others that have really influenced my thinking and worldview. But Daniel Quinn's book, Ishmael, really transformed my life. And if you haven't read it, I highly urge you and encourage you to read it and to share it with everybody you know, because I think it is exactly the kind of cultural shift, or at least the suggestion of a cultural shift that we need to make it on this planet for the next 50 years. We are hitting a tipping point, and I think it's starting to become obvious when it comes to climate change and the biosphere, and of course how many people are competing for these various dwindling resources on the planet. We're seeing more and more clashes over basic things like water, and people are still talking about skin color and still carrying these stories from childhood into their adult lives and harming other people as a result. So there's a lot in this book that I think can inform how we can move forward. And the only way to really effectively implement it, I think, is to, number one, live it, love it, learn it, live it. And number two, just share it with as many people as possible. Not everybody's going to be receptive to the message, but if we get enough people on board thinking in some of the ways that Daniel Quinn urges us to think, I think we'll be pleasantly surprised at the outcome. So Ishmael is the book. Daniel Quinn is the author. Rest in peace, Daniel. Thank you for your work. Transformed my life. And you can visit ishmael.org for all his books and news and essays and things like that. And there's a link to purchase the book on Amazon on our website in the show notes. So that is Lovesick, a Netflix comedy, and Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, a very transformative book on culture. It's also just an entertaining read, so check it out. It's a fiction. It's a novel technically, but it's couched within the dialogue in the novel is all his ideas, or many of his ideas, because his other books explore other ideas. Check those out. Links on our website. Anything else before we skedaddle here?
I don't think so, man. Today's episode of Inside Acting was produced and co-hosted by yours truly, AJ Meyer, and of course, Trevor Algatt. Team IAP also includes Jen Levin and Grace Gordon.
You guys can visit us online at InsideActing.net to sign up for our weekly email dispatch and listen to all of our episodes. We're also on social media and pretty much everywhere else you get your podcasts. And we just want to give a shout out to VO2GoGo. We didn't mention them earlier in the episode, and you guys who have listened to us for a long time are quite familiar with VO2GoGo at this point, we hope. But if you haven't checked them out, guys, total disclaimer, I am one of their coaches, both online and in person in Hollywood every month, but it is a really fantastic zero to hero year-long curriculum, not just for voiceover, but for acting and business and technology in general. Check it out at vo2gogo.com/start. You can go to that website right now and get a free starter course that'll really set you up to win in voiceover, and I think give you a lot of the tools you need to get started right away. And if you want to go deeper with it, then you can consider signing up as a pro and attending the workouts and getting access to the 36 module video course. But it is a fantastic resource, and I think that as we move forward in this industry and things continue to transform and continually go online, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people who are adept at voiceover. So if that tickles your fancy, check it out, vo2gogo.com/start.
Thank you for the fancy tickle, Trev. You can still directly support the continued production of Inside Acting, the continued production and the continued archiving of Inside Acting with either a one-time financial contribution or an ongoing monthly contribution, learn about all that at insideacting.net.
All right, that's it for episode 303, everybody. Thank you so very much for listening. Really grateful for you, really grateful for this journey, and excited for what's next. We'll see you next week in episode 304. Until then, just ask.